Okay, folks. First of all, great presentation this morning. I've got about 40 minutes, okay? And you can see the topic that I want to address here this morning. It's assessing and coaching leaders. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to approach it from the angle of best practices and really tips and ideas on what you can do as you go about working with your current leaders to raise their bar in terms of their effectiveness, but also the notion, as was identified this morning, looking at your high potentials and your emerging leaders and identifying who are your emerging leaders from the vast individual contributor population that you've got. How do you identify those supremely talented individuals, right? How do you identify those people, and how do you leverage assessment information, both from an objective standpoint as well as a subjective standpoint, to isolate individual development plans that will launch these people so they can be successful? So anyway, long story short, this is truly a great opportunity for me. This is the fourth time I've been in front of these groups in the last couple of weeks. And you heard some compelling research this morning. We also, at Executive Development Associates, we do every 2 years we do an executive trends research study where we research and survey over 150 organizations worldwide. And then we follow up when we interview organizations. The people that we interview are not only you folks, okay, leaders of HR, but we also interview and survey operations executives. And my purpose here today is not to really share everything that's generated from this research. We just completed our study of 2011, and I am one of the co-researchers in the study. I just wrote it up, and we issue it and publish it in partnership with Pearson, okay? So it's going to be out later this year, but I just wanted to kind of whet your appetite in terms of what we're seeing and really what you're seeing, because obviously we're talking to people like yourself. When you look at this whole challenge of the leadership gap, how do you identify leaders, how do you develop them, and so on and so forth. So what I like to do is just talk about what are some of those selection and promotion challenges that are coming back to us that is being shared by folks like you in a variety of organizations, profit, nonprofit, different geographies. My purpose here is not to hit everything on this list, but the ones that resonate, folks, what I've done is I've highlighted these, and very quickly I just want to get a sense from the group to see if these are resonating in your organization. High potentials are not identified and or identified inaccurately. How many organizations in this room would be willing to raise their hand and say, hey, guess what, that's us. We're having a challenge with that. Okay, so, again, so I see a lot of head nodding. Certainly an issue. Succession issues, as we heard this morning. Selection and promotion instruments do not measure leadership success factors. How many organizations in this room are perhaps fighting that challenge a little bit? Okay. Here's one that I find very, very interesting. Prevailing inaccurate belief exists that the best predictor of future performance is past performance. Now, why do I say it's an inaccurate belief? Anybody? Okay, Tom says it's not believing in their potential. I think that's an excellent point. Anybody else? Different skill set. Absolutely. Excellent point. Anybody else? Cultural? The cultural issues? Absolutely. There's a gentleman by the name of Marshall Goldsmith. How many folks have heard of Marshall Goldsmith before? Fabulous executive coach. He's written numerous books. And in those books, and every time you hear him speak, he talks about this whole concept. This whole concept that is so powerful that really what got you here What got you here as a leader will not necessarily get you there. And it is for the combination of reasons that we just heard in this room, okay? So what I'd like you to think about, and what was shared this morning I think is very, very compelling, that as you begin to look at who are your future leaders, you've got to have a concept in mind as to what success looks like. And so many organizations are so very, very good at doing competency models. How many organizations in this room have competency models? Okay? A lot of hands go up. And very often when we start to go into those organizations and we delve into the complexity of these competency models, we get into this notion of, are you futuring your competency models? And they say, what are you talking about? And what I talk about is your definition of success in terms of what drives operating success right now probably has very, very little to do with what's going to drive operating success in your organization 5, 10 years down the road. All right? Everybody with me on this? So very, very important as professionals, and we're all professionals in this room, we all do the same kinds of things. I've been doing this for 30 years, this whole area of talent leadership, talent management, and you folks as well are professionals. You're here today, right, to get some ideas and bring these ideas back and really create a call for action, right, to really make a difference. That's beautiful stuff. It really is. We have, I think, matured as an industry significantly. Significantly. We're doing some great things. But there are still challenges, okay? And as you look at this, I mean, really, if you went down each one of these items, it would end up being very depressing. Am I correct? These are the challenges that you're faced with every day. So, hey, guess what? Selection and promotion, yeah, there's challenges in that area. But I think we would also say that there are certainly significant challenges in this whole area called, how do you benchmark? How do you diagnose? How do you calibrate your leaders? Right? How do you do that? And again, we don't have time to hit everything on this list. But some of the ones that are significant that, again, were discussed this morning, yes, skill and talent gaps. Yes, there are bench strength issues. In our executive trend survey, we discovered 3 significant findings. 60 pages long. I just finished it. It was exhausting, but it was very, very interesting to go through it. Number 1 finding, organizations like your own are struggling big time with this issue. And again, it was reinforced this morning. Number 2, when organizations are looking at who are their future leaders, there is an overemphasis on opinion offered by senior management, offered by executives around, I think that person in these executive review meetings has the potential to become a director, a vice president, and so on and so forth. And then in these executive review meetings, you force an executive to say, well, why don't you back that up? And they don't have very much. So therefore, there is an over-reliance on perception and subjectivity. And there's not enough objectivity being funneled into these review meetings, okay? And there's one other finding that I'll share with you in a second. But does everybody got the gist on this? I mean, this all makes sense, right? Okay. When you get into the third challenge area, again, some of the ones that really jumped out were training and development not linked to competencies, training and development not linked to assessments, coaching not utilized to propel high-posed and emerging leaders. By the way, we do see a prevalence of coaching, executive coaching, utilized on current leaders, and more so with high potentials. With emerging leaders, as we heard this morning, there's an emphasis on mentoring, which is great. So the connections with senior executives become very, very key. And when you get into this whole area that I call demarcation, These are the 4 Ds, okay, which I'm going to put a picture up here in a second to kind of pull all this stuff together. But when you look at demarcation, which is this whole concept of how do you separate the A players from the B players from the C players, it is not only important to achieve this objective, very important that you achieve this objective in terms of demarcating performance, very important. In fact, most organizations have matured to the point where, guess what? They actually do a very, very good job around performance reviews. Not perfect by any stretch, but there is a significant need to really strengthen demarcation in 2 areas. One is identifying potential. Would everybody agree with me that identifying potential is certainly more complicated than identifying who's your better performers, right? For a lot of the reasons that we talked about earlier. And then the other challenge related to that is, are they ready? Okay, are they ready now? Are they ready in 3 to 5 years? So the readiness factor, okay? So all of these become very, very critical. So some people say, hey, John, I really like what you're talking about. Is there a visual? And yeah, there's a visual that I'd like to share with everybody here today that really does, I think, pull this all together. You'll see a picture up here that does resemble a stealth fighter. Everybody in the room familiar with a stealth airplane? Okay? At the bottom, you will notice the 4 Ds. Deployment, diagnosis, development, and demarcation. Let's think of these one at a time. Deployment. To what extent are you selecting and promoting those leaders who have the highest probability of being successful? That's important, all right? To what extent are you selecting and promoting those leaders who have the highest probability of being successful? Number 2, to what extent are you objectively benchmarking and diagnosing that these individuals do have the skills and the capabilities, right? The skills and the capabilities to excel at a high level now into the future. That's what's meant by diagnosis. Development. Development is the whole concept of creating that 70-20-10. I love that. 70-20-10. What does 70 mean in terms of development? Anybody? The experiences. We heard some great discussion this morning from you folks on that, right? You got to be able to have those experiences, and you got to plan those experiences. So vitally important in terms of raising the bar on your talent, okay? The 20% reflects what? Learning from others. There it is. The mentoring and the coaching, connectedness with others, so vital. And then the 10%? The formal training programs. But you know what's interesting is what we need to think about is, to what extent does your 70-20-10, your combination of developmental opportunities, to what extent are you creating a culture where your leaders and your emerging leaders are passionate and are motivated to become the best that they can be? That's really what development means for each and every one of us, actually. How many parents in this room, right? Parents. Got 4 kids myself. My wife and I, we've been married 32 years. We got 4 kids. The kids are a little bit older. You can tell, right? But I think we can all identify with this concept that we want to create environments that are conducive where human beings truly want to become the best that they can be. I'm not sure we always do that, okay? And then finally, demarcation, the separation, so on and so forth. What's really beautiful about this is that your ability to successfully combat any one of the challenges that we've already discussed is truly in direct proportion to how strong you are in those 4 Ds. So anyway, do you know the stealth fighter? The actual stealth fighter has 4 engines. I wasn't aware of that. I just wrote a book on this, by the way. I'm very excited about this. The book is going to be out this fall. You know what the title of the book is? So creative. You're going to love this, Tom. Right? Stealth leadership, okay? How to assess and coach leaders. All right? That's the concept, okay? I wrote the book, and then I figured, hey, let me look this up. So I went, and I did some research, and I said, I wonder if a stealth fighter has 4 engines. The book's already done. So I'm sitting there saying, please, it's got to have 4 engines. Sure enough, it's got 4 engines. All right? So I'm excited now, right? So when you look at it, when you think of 4 engines that are propelling a stealth fighter, I think we'd all agree that those 4 engines better be working pretty good, right? They better be well oiled. They better be working in concert. Everybody with me on this? You love that? You like that analogy, don't you? Some of you sitting there saying, just shut up. I get so excited about this stuff. I really do. So anyway, here's the concept. It's predictive. We heard some great research this morning. This is predictive. All predictive. Okay? So if you're really good in these 4 Ds around leadership, assessment, and development, you create an environment in your organization that I would say is very magical. And people say, well, what do you mean by this magical environment? It's reflective of 3 things: capability, commitment, and alignment. Question: do you want your leaders showing up to work every day that they are capable to execute at a high level? Obviously. The 2 words that I like to use that really capture capability are these 2 words: can do. It's the can do. Not only do we want leaders who show up to work every day saying, I can execute at a very high level. We want everybody showing up to work every day saying, I can execute. Everybody with me on this? I think we'd all agree, though, that not everybody shows up to work saying, what? I can execute. We want people saying, I can execute. You've got to excel in those 4 Ds to create that environment. Capability is can do. Commitment. Commitment's a whole nother game. If capability is can do, commitment must be what? Yeah, it's the will do, it's the want to, it's the passion. Right? It's the drive, it's the motivation, it's the zeal to make a difference. So we got can do, we got will do, and we've got the 3rd one. The 3rd one is the alignment factor. All right? Alignment is very, very powerful. Alignment exists when a leader has a sense of connection with the strategic direction of the organization. It's connectedness. How many people in this room would be willing to raise their hand and say, hey, I know what this guy John's talking about. Right? I have felt connected at some point to the mission of my organization. How many people have been there before? It's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Because what happens is there's a values alignment, there's an emotional alignment, right? There's a behavioral alignment, all of the predictive factors that drive execution. It's a beautiful thing. Here's the thing. Capabilities can do. Commitment is will do. Alignment is must do. Must. And when you look at leaders who are unbelievably successful, and we already know this. You know this. When you look at leaders who are unbelievably successful, every day they are continuously, passionately motivated to improve and increase capability, commitment, and alignment every day. And here's the nice thing, great leaders, under the umbrella of their own capability, create an environment where their people become more capable, more committed, more aligned. Everybody with me on this? Now, we could spend hours on this. Some of you sitting here saying, please don't. That's okay. I can handle it. I can handle it. But one thing that's very, very interesting is this. These are called leading indicators. Capability, commitment, and alignment. They are leading indicators. They are leading indicators for operating success in an organization. The economy. Sad subject. When you look at the economy, there are leading indicators, there are lagging indicators. The stock market is predictive of the economy. Always has been. Right? The consumer price index is predictive of our economy. Unemployment is not predictive of our economy. Unemployment is not a leading indicator, it is what? You got it. Turnover in your organization is a leading or lagging indicator, you tell me. Lagging. It's happened. Performance in your organization is leading or lagging. When you do performance reviews, is that a leading or lagging indicator? It is a lagging indicator. Here's the concept. If we want to propel, think of every leader. Think of every leader in your organization. Think of every emerging leader. Think of everybody as truly being a stealth fighter. Everybody is flying a stealth fighter. Isn't that exciting? Visually think about that. Everybody's flying the stealth. Your organization is, in fact, a macro stealth. It's a big stealth. Right? It combines all the little stealths. Right? And when you think about what's going to drive success for all of us around leadership assessment and development, it is very important that you calibrate these three things always. Always. Measure these. You got to measure these. That's why engagement surveys. How many people do engagement surveys? Engagement surveys is a calibration tool. Calibration. What are you calibrating? You're calibrating not only individual emotions and feelings and perspectives, but you're also calibrating team, right? So when you look at leadership, if you're only doing 360-degree surveys, how many organizations in this room utilize 360s? 360s is a fabulous calibration tool. Not for measuring potential. There are more mistakes that I encounter with organizations that are utilizing 360s to project talent for the future. Big mistake. A 360 is what it is. It is a measure of current performance. If you want to measure potential, you better do some other things. And some people say, well, what are you talking about? You've got to measure other things, like somebody's inner core. You've got to measure somebody's intra and interpersonal skills. DDI does a lot around simulation. Assessment centers. How many people in this room have used assessment centers before? What a fabulous assessment approach to calibrating potential. You don't even need to spend the big-time money on assessment centers. There are great online video simulations that you can use to identify, can somebody truly execute at that level, okay? Everybody has this, right? Everybody got this on this? Okay, we're doing good? Okay. So anyway, by way of summary, not in terms of my presentation, but in terms of the stealth fighter. Again, we saw some very compelling research this morning. This research is the Hackett Group out of Atlanta. A couple years ago, they did some great research. What they did was they took the Fortune 500 organizations. And what they did was they broke them into two groups, top quartile versus everybody else. in terms of their execution of the 4Ds. Okay? Top quartile versus everybody else. So those organizations that really excelled in the 4Ds were the top quartile. And then what they did was they looked at the operating result differences between the two groups. And what you see on the screen are the significant differences between the top quartile and everybody else. Okay? Pretty powerful. Quality of hire, promotion, and succession metrics are the leading indicators that drive your organization's operating results. Let me just get a quick show of hands on this. How many organizations in this room would say to me that you have a formal succession process in place? Show of hands. Okay, looks like about 40%. That's about what we discovered in our current research study. Do you know that there is a high relationship between the existence of a formal succession process in your organization and operating success? Okay? So if you're not doing it, I would recommend that you start moving in that direction. You can't start big, though, right? You got to start with the pilots and so on and so forth. How many organizations in this room have identified for your key roles those 2 to 3 individuals who are ready now? Show of hands. But also identified those individuals who might be ready in 3 to 5 years. If you are doing that kind of work, your probability of achieving operating success goes up dramatically. If you are measuring the success rate of those individuals that you promote, you have a higher probability of driving operating success. If you are measuring the retention rate of those individuals in your successor pool, you have a higher probability of being successful. Do we need to go on? Enough said. Succession planning is so vitally important to closing that leadership gap. We've got a ways to go here, folks. We really do. Okay? And how many organizations in this room are using the 9-box methodology, which is a great methodology. I teach it. I work with organizations. I love the 9-box, where we measure performance and we measure potential. But if you're not calibrating both axes before you get into review meetings with senior level executives, in medicine, prescription before a diagnosis is what? It's stupid. I had to say that. It was just hanging there for me. What do you want me to say, right? What's your name? I think she liked that comment, but we'll talk later. Prescription before diagnosis in medicine, it's malpractice, right? But in the work that we do, it's malpractice. So if you've got a bunch of senior executives sitting around a room, and you're the HR executive, and you're running these meetings, and people are talking about opinions, hey, I think Tom shows big-time potential. I saw Tom do this, saw Tom do that. I mean, that stuff's going to be inevitable in these meetings. But if you don't have objectivity, fueling, before you get into those meetings, calibration of both performance and potential, you're going to end up with situations where you're going to be playing Major League Baseball, okay? St. Louis Cardinal, or should I say Pittsburgh Pirates. Where is he? He left. Where is he? Is he outside? I'll talk to him later. You want to play Major League Baseball, right? With Major League players. Am I correct? If you have too many minor league players on your Major League team, you're in trouble. And there's a lot of organizations in trouble because they're not doing enough on that calibration kinds of stuff, okay? Now, real quick here, just a couple of things and then we'll move on. Leadership capability tools or processes are last on the agenda, not first. First, operational leaders must believe, key word, that leadership capability is the most critical variable in driving operating excellence. If you don't have senior executives who truly believe in this concept, you've got work to do. I am hopeful that this research work that's been done by Taleo and DDI and McKinsey and EDA provides a lot of foundation for you going back having really compelling discussions. There are numerous challenges across the talent management human capital lifecycle that you encounter. If unsolved, these challenges will exact a significant toll on the health and vibrancy of your organization. And again, the stealth fighter model provides organizations with a predictive path. Superior talent leadership is the science of focusing on leadership indicators, as they are proven precursors to driving superior leadership capability, and so on and so forth. And just a couple of minutes on this concept. This whole area of working with leaders and emerging leaders. And what you see on the screen, folks, is a competency model, okay? The one that we work with at EDA and the one that I work with as an executive coach is here. It's not meant to be the only competency model, because there are many that exist. On the outside of this diagram, the outer core, you will see a number of competencies that, at least in terms of our research, truly do drive leadership success. You will notice this whole concept of critical thinking, which, by the way, in our recent survey 2 years ago, never showed up. But critical thinking skills in emerging leaders and current leaders is now number one in the research that we just did. How many people in this room have seen this whole notion of, hey, we got to have people who are really very good around critical thinking? Show of hands. I see more hands going up than we saw a couple years ago. It's fascinating, and the reason is it's the pace, right? It's the pace and the complexity of business. So what's interesting is, when you look at leaders and your emerging leaders, you want people who can recognize assumptions, who can successfully evaluate arguments, who can draw sound conclusions. What's also very interesting is, it is very difficult to be a great problem solver as a leader unless you are a critical thinker. It is very difficult to be a strategic thinker unless you're a great critical thinker. Everybody with me on this? So critical thinking is a very, very important concept. We see this increasing over the next 5 to 10 years. And certainly the other ones are important too. How about emotional leadership? Emotional intelligence. Show of hands. Very, very critical. Sensitivity. Let me tell you what. If you assess a leader, and you have a leader who scores very high in power, is that a good sign or bad sign? Anybody? Let's say they score at the 99th percentile on this whole concept of power. What would you interpret that as? Anybody? Anybody? Domineering? Controlling? I'm sorry? Yeah, without question. Narcissistic? Status conscious? Excellent point. Anybody else? You got it. Exactly. My experience is, if you have somebody who's scoring really high in power, there's probably some other issues that you got to get at. What you want is, you want to see sociability. You want to see sensitivity. Scoring high. If you have a leader who scores very high in their need for commercialism, money, that's not good. Okay? So when I coach to that, we want to alter the hierarchy, if you will, of their value system. so it aligns with organizational success. Now, by the way, I apologize about this. You might be wondering what this stands for. This EM stands for emotions, okay? And very quickly on this, what I find very compelling and how many people in this room do executive coaching with your people, okay? You want to raise the bar. You cannot raise the bar on any leader. You can't get them to execute the outer core unless they have a strong inner core. Make sense? You got to coach from the inside out. That's why when you do 360s, and I'm often asked to debrief 360s with executives, I love to do it, but it's not as powerful if I just have the 360 information and I don't have a view into the intra and the interpersonal characteristics. The intra and interpersonal characteristics are enduring. Somebody who is an emotional leader at one point, at a certain level, who scores high in certain areas, high probability that they're going to execute that at another level. Okay? In fact, the inner core is more predictive of potential and readiness than the outer core assessments that you might do, 360s and so on and so forth. So people say, well, what are you talking about? I think we'd all agree that great leaders do have a strong self-concept. Correct? They believe in themselves. They can go too far, right? But you want a leader, and when you're looking at your emerging leaders, you better make sure they got a great self-concept. You better make sure they are character people. Can you measure character? Anybody? Can you measure character? What do you think? Don't make any guesses about your future leaders until you calibrate character. You can measure character indirectly. Measure their values. There's a relationship between the two. So people say, what are you talking about? Here's what I've discovered. Share this with you. What are the 6 character things that you want to see in your current leaders and future leaders? Okay? Here's number 1. You want to see courage. Courage. By the way, I love this concept. Courage is very different than fearlessness. Very different. Courage is an act of conviction. It is an act of conviction. Fearlessness, by contrast, is a thought and feeling. There are differences. How many people in this room have met the leader who likes to talk a big game? Who is more likely to profess that they're courageous, but when it comes down to making a really tough decision, right? When it comes down to making that really tough call, they fall short. How many people have seen that before? By the way, that is the majority of executives who exist today. The minority are those individuals who are willing to raise their hand and recognize that, guess what, they don't have all the answers, that they are vulnerable, that they are afraid of making a tough decision, but when it comes down to making that decision, they can execute. Can everybody see the difference between the two? The second essence of character that I believe is so critical, and especially with the Gen X and Gen Y, so many talented people. Would everybody agree with me that Gen X and Gen Y populate unbelievable talent that exists? But we got to see this. We got to see diligence. We got to see diligence. I teach a course at Florida Atlantic University in the EMBA program. I work with these people. I love working with these people. Let me tell you what. Every one of these people that I talk to, you know what they say to me? I want to become CEO when? Yesterday. And my message to them always is, yeah, you're on the right path. And we're going to work hard to ensure that you become the best that you can be. I don't know if you'll become a CEO. But I know one thing for sure. You got to work your tail off to achieve what you want to achieve. Diligence is a character element that drives success. I got another one for you. Gratitude. Gratitude. I have the pleasure and privilege to coach a gentleman, and I know he wouldn't mind me sharing this today. I work with the CEO at FedEx Freight. His name is Bill Logue. Bill is an incredible leader. I'm very, very good friends with Bill. What Bill shared with me a couple years ago was his career did not take off until he started to recognize the importance of showing gratitude to people who helped him along the way. Not only personal friends, family, but also the network of people that he worked with, employees included. Gratitude. Here's another one, honesty. Here's another one, loyalty. That's a tougher one nowadays, but that's a good one. Modesty. Modesty's a good one. Modesty. Okay? These are the kinds of character elements that do drive success. Can everybody see they are at their core? They are at the core of predicting success. So anyway, what's meant by this is this. Strong inner core. Strong thoughts, strong emotions, strong behavior, great execution. Leaders who have lousy thoughts, lousy emotions, execute lousy behavior. Why am I looking at you? It wouldn't be you, would it? Wouldn't be you, right?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. So anyway, I could spend hours on this. I drew this picture when I was 16 years old. Do you believe me? I drew this when I was 16. Didn't look like this. Looked a little different. But I learned at 16 that there's validity to this. How many people remember the time when you learned how to drive a stick shift automobile? Very sad. I learned on a Volkswagen Beetle. How many people learned on a Volkswagen Beetle? That's also very sad. I see one hand going up. What's your name, sir? Dan? I like you, Dan. So anyway, this was outside of Waltham, outside of Boston where I grew up. And my dad comes up to me and he says, hey, do you want to learn on the stick-shift automobile? I'm 16, what do I say? Let's go. My dad is no longer with us, but my dad was really the prototypical Italian guy, right, from Brooklyn, New York. Pretty tough guy, great guy. So he said, hey, let's go. So we go to the high school parking lot. And I said, why are we going to the high school parking lot? What do you think he said? He said, it's big. I said, that's negative. He said, I don't care. So we show up at the high school parking lot. I sit down. And I don't know what it was, folks, but I froze. Anybody been in that situation before where under a lot of pressure you just kind of freeze? Right? So this is me. And then all of a sudden, I can sense there's a lot of frustration from the other seat, which is very close in that Volkswagen Beetle. So I'm doing nothing, and then all of a sudden, and I didn't do anything again. And then all of a sudden, what does he do? Hits me again. And I was afraid to look. But I eventually did look over. And the sight was incredible. He looked at me. And he said, do something. And he said, do it now. I looked at him and I said, I don't know what to do. He said, press the clutch and turn the key. I looked down and I said, it's 3 pedals. And I got 2 feet. There's no way that I can drive this automobile that's got 3 pedals and I got 2 feet. There's no way. I can't do it. Right? So what's interesting is, as a result of trial and error, a lot of feedback, a lot of pain. By the way, one of the great ways to develop leaders is to create pain. Correct? Failure. I love baseball. Baseball is actually a very, very good example of that because major league hitters who hit 300 are what? Paid well. They're paid big time. You just got to get to 3.0. You got to get to the 3. That's the key. Isn't that amazing? So 7 times out of 10, and you don't care how many times I strike out? No, we don't care. As long as you get 3 hits out of 10, if you strike out 7 times, we're a little bit concerned. But guess what? We know that you're going to generate value for us, right? It's an unbelievable concept. So if you go up to Major League Baseball players, and I have the pleasure of actually coaching a few of these human beings, very interesting. And you ask them, do you learn more as a result of the base hit that you generated or the horrible strikeout that you just experienced? And what do they say? Strikeout. I already know when that lefty pitcher comes at me, right? At 96 miles an hour and they drop down to the side, I already know next time I'm not going to execute what I just did. All right? Everybody with me on that? So same concept. So anyway, long story short, I've been doing this for a long time. And all I've done is I've taken this concept now to work with folks like yourself and organizations, but we all live this. And I always share this poem, but I never recite it. I share it, but I don't recite it. When I coach executives, and I have the privilege of working with many, many fine executives, young people, older people, I try to instill these concepts so that there's a lasting impact. So there's a poem I'd like to share with you. And it goes something like this. Be careful of your beliefs, for your beliefs become your thoughts. Be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your feelings. Be careful of your feelings, because your feelings become your actions. Be careful of your actions, because your actions become your habits. Be careful of your habits, because your habits become your character. And be careful of your character, because your character becomes your destiny. Thank you all very much. Let's take a 15-minute break. Appreciate it. Thank you.